All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at one of the wildest, most ambitious theories I have ever come across. It's a single radical idea that claims it can unify everything from the bizarre behavior of AI to the nature of our own consciousness, and yeah, even the fundamental laws of physics. So let's see how it tries to pull that off.
So, we're going to start with a mystery, one that you've probably seen if you've ever played around with a powerful AI. I'm talking about its incredible ability to generate fluent, confident, and just completely wrong nonsense. Well, this theory argues that these so-called hallucinations aren't a bug, not at all. In fact, they might just be a massive clue pointing to the very structure of meaning and maybe reality itself. To really get our heads around this new physics of sense, we first have to diagnose what's supposedly so wrong with our current way of building artificial intelligence. You see, right now, our AIs basically live in a flat world. They learn to see language as this enormous map of connections, which words are statistically likely to show up after other words. Their whole job is just to find the most probable path from point A to point B. And look, it's an incredibly powerful method, but it has one big assumption, that the world of meaning is perfectly smooth, totally continuous. And this is where the theory makes its first big controversial claim. It says AIs hallucinate because their world is topologically flat. But the real world, the world of genuine meaning, has holes in it. It has gaps. Think about concepts like a married bachelor or a square circle. Those aren't just bad ideas, they are logical impossibilities. They're like impassable holes in the very fabric of logic. Our current AIs, though, they can't see those holes. They just chart a smooth, plausible-sounding path right over the void, and that's when you get nonsense. Okay, so if the problem is that AI's world is too flat and too smooth, what's the solution? Well, you've got to add some ruggedness, right? Some holes. And this brings us to the absolute core idea of the theory, a fundamental rule about any system that we would consider alive or conscious or meaningful.
The theory gives this a name: the obstruction. The idea is that for any system to be dynamic, to really make sense, it absolutely must be built around some kind of central impossibility, a flaw. Think about a legal system's endless pursuit of perfect justice, or a character in a story searching for unconditional love. These are goals that drive all the action, but can never, ever be perfectly reached. This flaw isn't a bug to be fixed. It's the engine that makes the whole thing run.
So what happens if you don't have that flaw? What if you actually manage to build a perfect system where every single thing is consistent and every loop is closed? The theory is really clear about this. You get symbolic death. The system becomes a sterile, rigid dogma. It's like a set of laws that's so perfect it can no longer adapt or evolve because there's no internal tension, no reason for it to ever change. It's dead. And here's the beautiful flip side to that. That central flaw, that lack, isn't a problem to be solved. It's the engine of all life. According to this theory, it's the very reason a system is forced to move, to grow, to evolve, to even invent the concept of time itself. All of it is just a constant, desperate attempt to navigate around this void at its core that it can never actually touch. All right, so if we have this system defined by a hole it can't reach, how does it, do anything? The theory says it has 4 basic moves, 4 fundamental gestures that it uses to navigate the world.
And here they are. You can almost think of them like 4 fundamental actions that any living system has to perform. First, you have emergence. That's the spark of something new, a random idea, a mutation. Then there's memory, which filters that new thing and tries to stabilize it to make sure it sticks around. After that is propagation, which is the impulse to spread it, to connect it to everything else. And finally, there's residue. That's the reality check. That's the friction and the error the idea encounters when it slams into the real world. Now, here is the really crucial part. It's not just that these 4 things happen. They have to happen in this exact order for something to become real and stable. Any new thought, or even a new species, has to first emerge as a novelty. Then it has to try to propagate, to connect with the rest of the system. Then it has to survive the test of reality. That's the residue. And only then, if it survives, can it be integrated into the system's memory. Get that order wrong, and it just fizzles out. Okay, so far this is a pretty cool theory about, cognition, maybe biology. But now we get to the part that is just completely audacious. This whole framework of flaws and gestures, it's not a metaphor. The theory claims it is the literal foundation of physics. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. The claim here is that the fundamental particles that make up you and me, the forces holding the entire universe together, they're not little bits of stuff. No, they are these stable, repeating patterns that emerge from the mathematical dance between these four abstract principles: creating, connecting, resisting, and remembering. And here it is. This is the theory's centerpiece. You could call it a periodic table of physics. It claims that the tension between any two of these gestures is what generates a fundamental particle. So let's look. Find memory on the side and propagation along the top. The theory says that where they meet, that tension between staying stable and spreading out, that is what an electron is. Or find propagation and residue. The friction between spreading out and hitting a limit, that's a quark. Even the photon is on here as the self-interaction of propagation. I mean, the whole Standard Model is supposedly derived this way. It's a lot. So this really forces us to ask a huge question, maybe one of the biggest questions of all. Are we living in a universe of substance? A universe made of tiny little things? Or are we living in a universe of form, where the deepest level of reality is actually just the dynamic tension between a few abstract principles? Okay, let's try to pull all of these threads together. We've got a universe built around a central, unreachable flaw navigated by four gestures, which in turn somehow generate the very fabric of physical reality. What kind of picture does that paint at the end of the day? Well, the biggest consequence is this. Reality isn't a straight line. There is no direct path to some final answer or perfect state, because that state, the center, is structurally impossible to reach. So what does that mean? It means all viable motion, everything from the way you think a thought to the grand expansion of the entire cosmos, is a spiral. It's the path, the dance, that a system traces in its eternal and always failing attempt to grasp its own center. And if that's true, it just completely flips our idea of what it means to understand something or someone. Understanding isn't me just transferring a packet of data from my brain to yours. It's when two systems, two minds, manage to shape themselves around the same structural flaw. It's when we share the same central question, the same beautiful shared impossibility of ever finding a final answer. And that really is the final mind-bending takeaway from all of this. This theory proposes a universe where meaning isn't some destination you arrive at. It's not a thing you find. It's not a final truth. Meaning is the elegant, dynamic, and endlessly spiraling shape of the path we all trace around a void that we can never, ever reach.